That was Message in a Bottle back to 1979 by The Police, a song that I loved back then when I was 17 years old. Playing drums on that track and a key member of The Police, one of the three people that started the band and the heart and soul really of the band is Stewart Copeland, and he joins us from Los Angeles. Hello, Stu. How are you doing, mate?
Pretty good. Hello, Queensland.
Yes, hello from Queensland to California, and it's good to see there's been some rain recently. But I got to tell you about Message in a Bottle because I was 17 years old when that came out, and I was on a summer camp chasing girls. I just left school, and that was playing on the beatbox. Everyone was singing along to it. And the previous year, it was "Staying Alive" by the Bee Gees, but people say there's a certain age where you really are very impressionable to music, and that was the age that I was, being a late baby boomer. That was the sort of anthem of me leaving school. But what's the background to that song? Because the drumming on that track is phenomenal.
Well, humans are very much like ducks. Um, and when a duck gets out of its shell, the first warm body it sees is mummy. And humans, when we hit 16, the age you were, uh, the first cry of outrage, of rebellion, that's daddy. And for me, it was Jimi Hendrix, and I am deeply honored to have been such for you. At that impression, at that age, that's when all the hormones are, and that's when the deepest impressions I think are made on who your heroes, your artistic and musical heroes, are going to be for life.
Yeah, of course, that was from the second Police album, Regatta de Blanc. But my brother, who was 18 months younger than me and had much cooler music taste, he had Elvis Costello and The Jam. He
Oh,
already
much
had
cooler.
Atlantis d'Amour, and that was an album that I could hear. And I'm thinking, oh, that's the same band that my brother Matthew has. And so I guess Message in a Bottle was the first number one in the UK, and it was the first huge hit in Australia as well.
Yeah, I think that is when Stingo hit his songwriting stride. And up until that point, when the police first started with my crap fake punk songs, and we were getting nowhere, until Andy joined with his real command of the instrument and much wider musical vocabulary, then the light bulb went on in Sting's head. And I don't think even he realized that he had such a gift for a knack for writing hit pop songs. He considers himself to be a jazz musician at the time. But punk, with its verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus format, rammed that format down his throat. So he took his musical sophistication and applied the rules of pop music to it. And the result was at first Roxanne, Can't Stand Losing You, and a few others. But as I say, I think he really hit his stride with Message in a Bottle.
Well, you mentioned Roxanne. Of course, that was the song that really announced yourselves to the world, particularly in Australia. It got to number 34 on the charts in Australia in 1978, number 12 in the UK. Tell us a bit of background about that, because I know it had a few different incarnations, didn't it, before you kind of really cracked it in terms of getting that success.
Well, yes, Roxanne and Can't Stand Losing You and So Lonely. We were very fortunate. We had a great record company, but they were doing singles deals. We'll do you a deal for one single, and it came and sank without a trace. And then, well, let's try another one. Came and sank without a trace. And then I had just a weird happenstance by fluke. I had a really crap song that I wrote myself and recorded and played all the instruments, guitar, bass, drums, piano, and even sang the darn thing under the name, a fake ID called Clark Kent. And nobody knew who it was, because if they had known who it was, the drummer in that dodgy fake punk band, I would have gotten nowhere. But I made the Radio 1 playlist, and I'm having a little hit. And so as a result of that, and we got on top of the pops. And in fact, I to this day like to remind good old Stingo that his first time on national TV was playing in Clark Kent back, because I didn't want to go on TV just myself. So I had a fake band. And there he was on TV playing my bass line, thank you very much, in a gorilla mask. Of course, he did eventually get the last laugh with Every Breath You Take, Message in a Bottle, Rocks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what that meant was that the record company said, well, we better sign these guys. And so then they did an album deal with us. And they kept coming back to these singles. And finally, I think second or third time around, they got on the playlist, and we had the beginning of the rest of history.
Well, Roxanne was a massive hit for the Police and really gave you a lot of momentum early on from the Atlantis d'Amour album in 1978. And as mentioned, it got to number 12 in the UK, number 34 in Australia. But managing someone like Sting, Stu, must have been challenging. And I've worked in media a long time. And when you're working with geniuses and brilliant people, it can be very, very difficult. And you were so important in bringing the band together and giving them direction. So, what were kind of your rules to manage Sting?
Let him do his thing. I was on the phone booking shows, booking the truck, basically road managing the band. And Sting, you stay home and write more songs because, like I say, we started out with my crap fake punk songs, songs of utility. But every time he would come in with a song, oh, that's an upgrade. Let's play that. So I was quite happy for him to stay home. And we were very tight. We still are socially, even though we're completely birds of a different feather. But I wouldn't say there were any rules. And if there were, I would have been too naive and gauche to have applied them with any skill. I just basically was fending. Okay, here's the rule. Keep talking. When I first called him up in Newcastle from London, and I said, look, this is a call about you, not your band Last Exit, just you as an individual. And he says, keep talking. Okay. So he's available. All right. But the other part of it was that's what I had to do for the next 2 years. Keep talking. Yeah, we got a photo session coming up. We got an interview with Queensland Radio coming up. We got it's all happening. We got a gig playing here. But, I had to keep talking and to keep the mojo going because the music was not what he was into at all, but he could see that the scene was happening and that I had some kind of handle on it. So I guess the rule was to keep talking, keep upbeat.
Well, it's all documented beautifully in Stewart Copeland's Police Diaries from a couple of years ago. You were a 26-year-old American, but you'd lived mostly abroad, and you had this vision of trying to make the band something big. When you look back now at that 26-year-old, what do you think? Were you thinking, wow, I was really on the seat of my pants? Or were you thinking, oh, this is very strategic?
He was hard working. I look at those diaries, woke up, drove across town to pick up the truck, drove back to Andy's place to pick up his gear, picked up Sting, rehearsed until 3:00, loaded the gear back in the truck, drove Andy's gear back, drove the truck back thing, then had a curry.
Lots of
then
curries, Stu. Lots of curries.
Every curry, but the man just all day, every day on the mission. Man, it makes me tired looking at it. And I wish I could tell that youngster, dude, relax. It's going to be all right. We're going to be fine. But if I had said that, that would have been really bad advice. That anxious guy on the phone, shaking the tree, made a contribution to our success.
Well, there are only 5 studio albums, and they were all very successful, particularly the last 4 all got to number 1 on the charts. Zenyatta Mondatta in 1980 had Walking on the Moon as one of the tracks, one of the singles, got to number 9 in Australia, number 1 in the UK. Very simple song, Stu. What's the background and the composition of that one?
I believe the song started out in a hotel room late one night, and the original lyrics was "Walking around my room," and he eventually came up with a more cosmic vision for the lyric. It was kind of reggae-ish. All of our stuff was reggae-ish, but not true reggae, because everybody was kind of slavish. Reggae hit the London scene, and everyone was trying to figure it out. But I had a secret sauce, a secret ingredient, which was Arabic music, which I'd grown up with, which was in my DNA. And Arabic music, the Debki dance and the balladi music, they call it, which is basically country music, has rhythmic features that are overlap with reggae, even though, to my knowledge, Jamaica never colonized the Arab world or vice versa. It's just a coincidence. So the drop kick on beat 3 of the bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and also the omission of 1 of the bar, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, void 2, 3, 4. These, and then the up check, check in Arabic, check, 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 or reggae, all that by different means actually meant that I could feel with right in my bloodstream that drop on the third beat of the bar. And it just came really natural to me, although I did listen to the Jamaican cats and caught plenty of licks. I had my own stuff, and I could play with it, and I could do other versions of it, and the world at large heard it as reggae.
We're speaking to Stewart Copeland about the journey of the police. Also from the Zenyatta Mondata album in 1980, massive hit for the police, Don't Stand So Close to Me, got to number 3 in Australia, number 1 in the UK. How much was that autobiographical, do you think, when Sting wrote that?
Oh, not at all. And it only became controversial during the Me Too era. Up until that point, it was based on a famous book by Nabokov, Lolita. And it was that situation, which he must have crossed his mind as a teacher in that point. I mean, he's human, and it must have crossed his mind. What would it be like to succumb to the temptation of these flirtatious adolescent girls who want to bring an apple for teacher? But, I know the guy. It never would have gone beyond just considering the predicament of that older man in Lolita. And it was kind of pathetic. And he certainly didn't identify with it, but he did see the angst of that storyline. He doesn't play that song anymore. I do, but he doesn't.
Well, that song, Don't Stand So Close to Me, got to number 1 in the UK.
By the way, he said no to a lot of money for a Right Guard commercial.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Well, that song got to number 1 in the UK, number 3 in Australia. We're speaking to Stu Copeland about the journey of the police. You were about 10 years younger, weren't you, than Andy Summers, who was already a very established guitar and so important to the success of the police. How was it getting him involved in the band, and how much do you think he was part of that massive success and the sound that you created?
Critical, of course. He was, as you say, a legendary triple scale, which means you pay me once and you pay him 3 times. And we met him on a session where we were getting paid once and he was getting paid 3 times. And he walks in, and after a day working with him, Sting and I, who were kind of a jobbing rhythm section, we did sessions, driving home, Sting, after a day of actual music, he was just going, we got to get that guy. We got to get that guy. And I'm going, yeah, great. Sure. I agree. Of course. We're not going to get that guy. We can't afford him. We got nothing to offer him to join a fake band that's dead in the water. And so, but then we ended up doing it was a guy called Mike Howlett. Long story. It was his album we were doing, and he had some dates, some shows, and we played a couple shows with Andy. And we even threw in a couple of police songs there to flesh out Mike Howlett's set. And so Andy did know a couple of our songs. But all the while, Sting and I are plotting and scheming. How can we get this? Sort of, like this dreaming, basically, without much hope. Until one day, I ran into Andy Summers at the Oxford Circus tube station, and he pulls me into a cafe. Stewart, you and that bass player, I think you've got something, but you need me in the band, and I accept.
Wow, that's then it was worth the chase, and running into him at Oxford Circus, you were prepared to try and get him in the band, and it worked.
I actually hadn't really had much hope of that, and then he brings it up out of the blue, and okay, well, I had to kick the wheels a little bit, and I had to say, look, Andy, you realize there's no record company. I'm the record company. Management, you're looking at it. Road crew, that's you. And he, to his credit, he wouldn't take that for an answer. He said, no, he had been playing on big albums as a sideman, but he wanted to be on the front cover. as a member of to be in a band, to be the artist, and a three piece, and he saw potential in Sting and I, and so he insisted on joining the group. And when I called up Stingo, he was just, that's it, he's in, that's it, okay, done deal, done deal. Uh, and I said, hang on, he's going to quit in 2 weeks. He's going to see the misery of our wretched career, and it's but that's it. He's in. Okay, the next issue was that Andy did stipulate that it shall be a three-piece band. So there's the little matter of Henry Padovani, our original guitarist, who was near and dear to us. He was the only genuine punk in the band. And while I was working the phones and Sting was writing songs, Henry was on the scene in every club watching, ingratiating, the NME, Melody Maker. They all thought Henry was the soul. Any soul that the police has or credibility is down to Henry Padovani. And by the way, he was extremely cool. Leather jacket, collar up, dark shades, Corsican guy. And he did play those three chords that I taught him really well. So we had to get rid of Henry. Was really a problem for us. It broke our hearts. But, and by the way, Sting is an extremely loyal man. This was tough. But music supersedes humanity.
Well, it was definitely the right decision. And the 1980s rolled around, and the Police were quite a different band, Stu. And I have to admit, I prefer the 70s Police, but the Ghost in the Machine album, 1981,
Oh, that's
spawned.
a big debate, by the way.
It is a
The
big
two,
debate. It is a big debate.
the first three were recorded by Hugh Padgham, a local doctor, in his studio above the dairy, and the last two were recorded by Hugh Padgham, super splendiferous, recorded Genesis, and really knew what he was doing. And the sound really expanded. Now, some, like yourself, prefer the earlier kind of do-it-yourself sound of the first three albums. Others prefer the sparkly big sound of the last two albums.
Well, the 1981 album, The Ghost in the Machine, had Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. Stu Copeland, tell me about that song and how it was a bit of a departure from what you were doing earlier on.
Well, I think that song was written in rebellion to the punk world that we inhabited. I believe on a bus down to the south of France, in a bus with the Clash, the Damned, and all these other punk bands going. It took a 2-day journey to get down there. We're stuck, and he was in the back of the bus going, "Every little thing she does is magic," and just as a kind of rebellion against that. But he was hung up by what rhymes with magic. The only word he could come up with, was pelagic. Magic and tragic. That's But he found a way to make it work. But that song was sitting there, and I would hear him strumming it occasionally. And it wasn't until album 4, perhaps, where he went off to Canada and did like a super. By this time, we all had home recording studios, and he did a version of it, probably for his own use. But we heard it and said, "Dude, give it up, give it up, come on, give it up." And so he did, and we did, and it was a very good song for us.
Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic was #1 in the UK, #1 in the US, #2 in Australia. We're speaking to Stewart Copeland
By
from.
the way, you've got all the facts and figures there. Just a little anecdote. I don't want to spoil your data, but we tried to record that song every which way. He had his demo, which was a hit. There, you just released the demo; it's a hit. But we tried to policify it. We did the reggae version, we did the heavy metal version, we did the jazz version, everything like that. Nothing. Finally, one grumpy morning on Montserrat, I said, "Okay, give us your dumb, stupid demo. Just run the demo down and I'll play along with it. And I'll show you how that doesn't work." And so there, with a little bit too much caffeine, I suppose, we played the song down once against his demo with him standing over me. He's saying, "Okay, chorus coming up, chorus, okay, guitar," and sort of waving me through the changes. And I was all grumpy and bashed it out. And that's the take. That's the record. One take. And every little thing she does is magic, but most listeners might not understand right away that the drummer on that track was in a towering rage playing this beautiful little pop song.
Stewart Copeland is our special guest today. We're talking about all the Police albums. Let's go to 1983, Synchronicity, which I guess at that time, there was a bit of tension within the band, Stu. How bad
Oh,
did it
yes.
get?
Oh, real bad. It was hard enough it started, the cracks started to appear in Zenyatta. Now, one must consider that old Stingo, there's this thing in bands called sanctity of the composer, which rock bands don't go with that too much. But by the time of Zenyatta, this guy had written several hits, and he was clearly the hit writer. And the place where that gift comes from is a certain obsessive relationship with the music, and he conceives of it thus, and it should be thus. Any deviation from the perfection in his mind is an insult to humanity, to art, to him. And I'm not very good at just playing along with, I'm a crap session drummer. I don't remember the arrangements. I've got no respect for the song. I don't listen to the lyrics. Couldn't give a rat's ass. I'm into the groove. Just play me a good groove and I'll bang something. Probably different every time. And so this became more and more difficult for the songwriter to deal with this uncontrollable band that wasn't playing it and executing his perfect vision. And I have sympathy for this. I write orchestral music now, which means I put every nuance on the page, and those guys play it just perfectly as according to the composer. Rock music doesn't work that way, and it just became more and more difficult. We get to Ghost in the Machine, and it was pretty tough. We did our best, but it was just hell for him it was hell for me when he would turn around and say, play this like that. I say, F off. Turn around, play your damn bass. I got this. And it was hell for him to just turn around with a simple request to the drummer in the band. Because, and by the way, he does kind of know what he's talking about. But that didn't help. In fact, the times when I really needed to throttle the life out of him is when he was right, son of a bitch. And so this became more and more difficult. And by the last album, Synchronicity, we actually reached dead stop. We could not move forward. What are we going to do? I can't stand this. All I want is to get off this island. All I want is to not be next to you. And so we realized, George Martin, producer of the Beatles, he owned the studio and he had a big plantation right next door. And so we sent Andy out to go talk to George and see if he could come over and produce us and help us. And so Andy makes the trek, down into the valley, crosses the little creek, climbs the other hill, gets there, and Sir George Martin makes him a cup of tea and says, well, now, how's it going over there, lads? And he says, well, we have a problem. We can't record. We're stuck in the water. We're dead in the water. Can you please come and produce us? And Sir George, in his great wisdom, declined. Actually, I think you guys can handle this yourself. And Andy hears this sage advice. Really? Really? Oh my God. And so he climbs, down the valley, crosses the little creek, climbs back up to the studio. Guys. George, this is what he said. He said, I think you guys can do it. No. We all look at it. Wow. George Martin said that we can. Okay. All right. Okay. What's that next track? Okay. Count me in. Okay. Sure. Fine. Whatever you say, Stingo. And so actually we got going again and we finished the album.
That's amazing. Yes, I actually know the members of the Little River
Now
Band.
that is a real great job of production right there. That's why he got knighted, I'm sure. I mean, Beatles, sure, that's cool. But that moment right there with the police was critical.
What a story. Yes. And I know the Little River Band also recorded on that island with George Martin. I know a couple of the members, of course, an Australian band. We're with Stu Copeland talking about all the hits of the Police and the albums and some incredible backstories. And there was going to be a sixth album until you had a riding accident, Stu, and that it never happened. Do you think it was fate? And take us back to that moment when you fell off a horse, right?
Well, it wasn't. I did not fall off a horse. Let me correct this right away. The horse did a somersault. I was obliged to dismount. Okay. And in the
Okay.
course of that, broke my collarbone. And so now that we've got that straightened out, we were going to go back and to re-record previous hits. And to this day, I can't think of what the logic was. I think it was something to do with, well, studios are better now. We're a much better band now. So let's go back and get it right this time. And so we only got, so the horse did a somersault. I was obliged to dismount and broke my collarbone. And so I couldn't play. But I had my Australia invented Fairlight computer. uh, up again, and Sting had his New England invented synclavier computer, and I couldn't play, but I could program the drums, and we got as far as doing one song. I've heard that we did two songs, but I don't know what the other song was, and the tapes have gone into the ether. But we did a version of "Don't Stand So Close to Me" that was roundly hated by all. I actually thought it was really cool. I mean, the drums suck because it's a machine, not me. But the vocal arrangements that Sting did, I thought it was really cool. I thought it freshened up, but the world hated it. And that's as far as we got. And by the way, we had another 2 week screaming match over the mix, which was he would come in and he would replace my snare drum sample with his store-bought crap fatback sample, Sludge. And wait a minute, I got my sample of my goddamn snare drum. It's my instrument. I shall, and we're arguing about which sample the machine will play. Kind of pointless. Anyhow, we argued about that for 2 weeks until finally we agreed to be at the mix at the same time as each other, and finished the record. And finally, the day we finally were back in, he shows up in the studio. And he says, and he presents me. He's got a rose. This is for you, Stewart. And I'm just sniffing the rose. And he pulls out a Swiss blade. Flick! Don't fuck up, Copeland.
Well, I love these stories, Stu Copeland. We really appreciate you joining us. So you have so many fans in Queensland and across Australia. Final word about your reflections now, a few decades later, on those roller coaster years with the Police.
They were kind of perfect. Neat. 8 years. Then 2 years of reunion tour decades later. But it was kind of neat and tidy. We struggled. We grew. Every album was bigger than the previous one. We got higher and higher and higher. Eventually, we're playing stadiums across the lands. But we realized that just the artistic friction was too difficult. Meanwhile, I was scoring movies. I was scoring a movie with Francis Coppola. And I get out of Police World, this horrible, it's like a Prada suit made out of razor blades. And I go over there and I'm making music and just enjoying the experience of working with Francis Coppola. And man, I could see my life ahead. And Sting was getting into acting and Andy was getting into his photography. And we realized the only way that we could pursue any of these other dreams was to kill the golden goose and tell the record company and management, because we were the only three people who thought this would be a good idea to disband the group. Everybody else thought that was a terrible idea. But we had to be convincing. We had to melt down the cage and eat the golden goose so that we could be free.
Well, Stu Copeland, it's a real pleasure talking to you. I love the stories. You're looking great. And thank you for sharing incredible insights into one of the world's top bands. And we really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for listening.